Welcome to another episode of the Monte and Wolf Show. Today, we are doing the show 1 day early. So, as it stands right now, the Sunday games, including Guangdong versus D+, have not yet been played, but we can talk about the Telecom war. We can talk about the upcoming Korean teams at the Esports World Cup as GenG looks to go and defend their international MSI title against the same field of Tier 1 region teams. But first, guys, this show is going to be brought to you by Into the AM. And of course, Into the AM makes delightful men's apparel of both. Wolf and I are wearing some right now. He's got a beach shack. I have a beautiful ship rolling on the high seas. They make some great graphic tees, but they also make a ton of other men's apparel, polos, Henleys, tank tops, joggers, athletic shorts, work pants, anything you could want in terms of menswear. And they ship everywhere in the world. And this week is their July 4th sale. It's 30% off everything until July 8th. So go now to intotheam.com/LFN. And not only will you get that 30% off, but if you use code LFN, you get an additional 10% off. So really, it's 40% off. Massive sale going on this week. How have you enjoyed your Into the AM apparel?
I've really enjoyed it. The material is actually super nice, and that's what I like about it the most. And there's tons of different designs on the website you can pick. So, if you're into a beach shirt like what I have, or if you like, what Monty's wearing, there's something for you there. If you like skeletons and cool other art, like there's so many different styles that you could pick from. That's what I really enjoyed about browsing the website. And if you just want a plain t-shirt as well, they have that too. And I've been wearing some of those as well. Super comfortable. So it's been awesome.
Excellent. Thank you, Into the AM, for sponsoring our show. Again, use code LFN. Remember to go before July 8th. Pick up your order. They ship basically everywhere in the world, so no worries there. Many places for free if you get a minimum order size. I know our fans have been very happy with Into the AM. We've gotten a lot of comments on our Discord about how much people like the apparel, so try it for yourself. We all wear it. I actually basically just wear their t-shirts these days because I have a bunch of the unbranded ones as well, so I just have them in a variety of colors. I really like them. Anyway, let us discuss the Telecom war. KT's surprising upset at the home ground of T1. So we'll explain this home ground concept because this is new to the LCK.
Okay, so if you guys followed Overwatch, you'll be familiar with the concept where we had homestands, where you would have one team is hosting this event, and then, the production, Blizzard in that case, would actually travel the casters there, and then the fans would, be primarily of that region, of that area, coming to watch their favorite team. And obviously fans would travel in as well. But you have the casters there on site, and it's basically, instead of doing it at the arena, the main place where the broadcast happens, the ballpark in this case for LCK, you have a regular season match actually happening in a different location. So in this case, it's completely run by T1. Like they made this concept. They asked Riot, like, hey, we want to do this regular season match at a home ground, which is, essentially like a homestand.
Worth noting that the Comcast side that partially owns T1 now also owned the Philadelphia Fusion / Soul Infernal and did run in Overwatch League these homestands and actually hosted a final as well.
So they set up this venue in Goyang. It was pretty big. I wouldn't say quite as big as like an LCK finals venue, but
look like 5,000 maybe, right?
Yeah, it's quite large, right? And it was filled, and the production. So a lot of people were asking questions about this. I know the walkouts were kind of a disaster. The production was run by WDG, which is the company that runs OWCS in Korea and also runs Challengers. And that Challengers match also happened at this event. The Telecom War Challengers match happened on the same day, so
that's fun. Actually, I like it.
So they did that beforehand, and KT did win that one as well. They're the stronger team in Challengers. Anyways, so in LoL Park, the Korean casters and the English casters were casting remotely, and a lot of people asked me about this. I got a lot of tweets about this. I got a lot of texts about this, like, why aren't you there? I
Well,
had
you had
people
another
text,
match afterwards, right?
yeah.
In
So
the
people are
in the
texting
actual
me.
arena.
People were texting me like, "Where are you? I want to see you. I came to the thing," and I'm like, "I'm not there." So we did have the regular season match that happened after the Honda Life series, which was in Lowell Park. So that's one reason why we couldn't be there. And then the other reason was T1, because they ran the event. They wanted to have for their in-house broadcast their own casters. I'm not entirely sure who did it. I think maybe Wolf was there and they had some influencers, but I couldn't watch it because it was on site only, as far as I know. But anyways, so in the venue itself, they had a different cast than what the official LCK broadcast was in Korean, which they had the normal casters doing that, and then in English we were in Lowell Park. So that's why some of the disconnect happened, I think, between production while they were trying to do their walkouts for the in-house audience. The Riot production for normal LCK was trying to do their normal walkout setup where we do like the one team, the music plays the other team, and then I think something got botched in rehearsal where the players thought they were walking directly to seats, but they were supposed to bow to the audience. So that happened. Then it got delayed, so they brought chairs out for them to sit down while they were waiting to do the walkouts. And as soon as the chairs came out, that's when they got the call from like All Park, hey, actually we're doing the walkouts now. You need to the walk. So they like all sit down and stand up. It was very bizarre, and I think
I
that
missed this
was
part of
a
it.
little it was a little bit of a disappointing part of the show, I think. But ultimately, from talking to people who were there and some of the LCK staff who were also there to help run the production. The fans were super happy with it. Everyone thought it was really hype. They also did in the venue Korean KBO baseball style cheers for all the T1
I
players.
noticed they had the hot girls in the front.
They had
Explain the KBO. So KBO is the professional baseball league in Korea, and if you go to a KBO game, which are very fun by the way, there are hot girls on top of the dugouts doing what, Wolf?
so the girls do dances, they lead cheers, and there's often a cheerleader who's is usually a male who's telling the getting the crowd hyped up, like he's got a microphone, he's yelling, and we're gonna do this, and then the girls are dancing and doing all sorts of fun stuff. Sometimes they do dance competition. Sometimes they even ask like people in the audience to come do dance competition with them just for fun. They'll put them on camera during the commercial breaks because on TV, there's a commercial break running, but obviously in the venue, there's not. So they run events just like you would see in MLB games if you go to a live game. But anyway, when the players come to bat in the KBO, each player has their own song, and it's not like America where they pick their favorite like song and it just plays like a little like 10-second clip.
Right.
They have
So
cheer.
basically, because we have European fans, so in American baseball, it's just like the depth of explanation here. In American baseball, you might have, each batter has a walkout song where, as Wolf says, it'll be a pop song or a rock song, and they'll play it. And so that becomes at home games that becomes affiliated with that particular player.
Right. And instead of that, in Korea, the fans have a cheer that all the fans know, and it's usually kind of like a repurposed song. Like it might be a popular Korean song, or it might be just some old folk song, but it replacing the lyrics with that player's full name. And they did stuff like that for the players during the breaks I saw videos, people were sending me videos of the venue. I can't remember which song they used, but they used a popular song for Owner, and then they put his name up. They had really cool graphics, and the fans were just like chanting his name like it was a KBO game. And I thought T1 did a really good job of really making the fan experience awesome and making sure the fans weren't bored during the downtime. They had all the cheerleaders there. They had a lot of celebrities there. Besides the like chair debacle and the walkout error, and obviously some of the camera equipment and stuff, because it's a travel event, wasn't as high quality as what you'd have at a regular season LCK game. I was really impressed. I thought they did a great job. The venue was filled, and I've been asking for this for a really long time. I think if the teams are really willing to invest in these types of events, I know not every team can necessarily afford that right now, but I know that the top teams probably can, and top orgs like Hanwha, for example, have a ton of money from their backing.
And
KT
also
also.
T1 SK Telecom does have a baseball team, so they're used to running things like this as well. They're called the Wyverns. That's actually the team that I have gone and seen in person in Korea. Was the SKT Wyverns or Wyverns or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah. So they ran this event, and I think that we should have more events like this. I've been calling for like, why don't we have venues for playoffs? We should have big venues for playoffs. They will sell out. I guarantee you every T1 game will sell out basically no matter what all the time. But even if it's not a T1 game, I think there are orgs like GenG, for example, KT, that will fill up smaller arenas. It doesn't have to be as big as the one we saw in Goyang, but
Hanwha
I
probably
think,
would as well. They also own a baseball team, the Hanwha Eagles, right?
yeah. And so looking at how this all ran and how this went, I feel like minus the production stuff, right? I think the proof of concept was absolutely there. And I think a lot of people say, well, it wouldn't have worked if it wasn't T1 because they wouldn't fill. But I think if you picked a slightly smaller arena, you could definitely fill it up because Lol Park games sell out every day anyways. The arena is about 450 to 500 people, sells out every day. I think you could probably double that or triple that and have a venue in another location to allow fans who don't live in Seoul to watch those regular season matches do it. And if the casters have to do it remote, like that proof of concept was proved as well today in that minus the draft problems as well, where they had to do the draft on paper because mic issues, which has nothing to do with like the remote broadcast. It worked and the cast didn't have any problems. And I think, especially because we have two regular season matches a day, if one is one place and the other one is in Lol Park, like I think it makes sense to have it remote. If both matches are going to be at the homestand, then maybe the casters do travel as well. But I hope that we can have more of this because it really just was a different level of energy and vibe, and the possibilities of what you can do in Lowell Park, a small venue like this, are so much smaller than what you could do on a road show, just because of the venue size. And like you can't bring a bunch of cheerleaders in there and do these grandiose things because there just isn't enough space. Like Lowell Park is an amazing venue, the best regular season venue I've ever worked in, to be honest. Like the Overwatch League one was pretty good, but Lowell Park is really good. It's very condensed as well. One thing I didn't like about the Burbank studio in Overwatch was you're always walking so far to get from place to place. But I do think that T1 will probably do this again, and I think they'll probably do it again soon, just to prove again. I think to Riot and also to other investors, like we can bring thousands of people to this regular season event. It was supposed to be a curb stomp basically as well of a game, and the KT fans still showed up in droves. There were so many KT fans there. It was insane.
Yeah, you could really hear the volume from the KT fans on the broadcast. It looked like a really good event. I mean, obviously, like having the differences between local production and the remote production caused a few issues. There were some delays due to audio issues, but they weren't terrible. I mean, they're kind of bad. But I think just as an experiment in the upside, also, I'm just going to correct myself here, Wolf. So the last time I went to a Korean baseball game was the last time I lived in Korea, and the SK Wyverns were a team. They have since they were bought by Shinsegae and have become the Landers, which is the team in Incheon where I'm living now. So there's a ton of Landers merch around, but I didn't realize that they were the same team. So SK no longer owns a baseball team, to be clear, but they did for a long time. However, yeah. KT owns a baseball team. Hanwha still owns a baseball team. Samsung. So a lot of the big companies that are or have been involved in League of Legends in the past are still owning baseball teams in Korea.
Yeah, definitely. Hanwha Eagles is my team because I go to Daejeon all the time. They're the Daejeon team. And my Daejeon friends love them, so they're not very good, but it is what it is. They play a lot of regular season games. You in KBO you play so many games that you will just get an upset on a big team randomly because teams are tired and they're traveling a lot. So I guess let's talk about the game itself.
Anyway,
yeah,
let's talk about this because this was obviously a massive upset. Wolf, for whatever reason, the Telecom war always delivers. It does not matter how good or bad these teams are, how many players get changed. It just ends up being close. It's wild. It's like D plus versus GenG. Are there any of the same players on these teams? Very few. Why is it so close all the time? Who the fuck knows? Just seems fated in some ways. But T1 versus KT looking like they are at their lowest point in years. Sure, they bounced back. They started out 0-4, but they had a very tough schedule. They did bounce back versus Brion earlier this week, but they couldn't even 2-0 Brion in what was the toilet bowl match for the team that was going to go 0-5. KT had just played, frankly, miserably. Their game last week that we discussed against Hanwha, it looked like they had just completely given up on life in that series. So for them to come to this homestand and not only put up a fight, but win these games was quite extraordinary.
It really was. I mean, they were on the verge of losing to Bro and going 0-5. After that last match, it looked hopeless, to be honest. And I was ready to write KT off, especially with some of the moves we saw, like Def going into Crowstorm and all of the disasters. the trickling of like
It's
trying
all
to
right. Don't
engage
worry.
me up.
Def didn't play well in this series either.
No, we're gonna get to that.
He somehow managed to forget that while playing Ezreal, he both has Flash and Arcane Shift, but still gets hit by every impale. Amazing.
So, like the first game of the series, we were all looking at each other on the desk. We were like, "Is KT good? Like, are they gonna win?" And the early game was really good in the bottom lane. And Barrow played very, very well. And I was calling for I need Pyosik to play with BDD. They need to just play Talia or play some setup champ. Like they need to play Vi. This is what they need. But I was like, there's no way T1's going to give it to him. They gave him the Talia in the first game. They had a really nice lead, but then Def didn't flash Impales. And it's pretty amazing because in the LCK, no one can hit Impale, actually. Like, no one has ever hit an ult, it feels like, except Zeus hit Deft every time when he didn't flash. And we talked about this a little bit on the desk, but there were a few times where Deft tried to Arcane Shift, like use his E to get out. And during there's a very, very, very small windup
cast
for
animation.
yeah, little animation. You buffer things like Blitzcrank hook with that. Like if you actually get Blitzcrank hooked, you'll still actually finish the Arcane Shift and you'll get out of it. But because Skarner's Impale is a suppression, you don't actually get out of that. So like you're in the animation and then actually no, you're just impaled. So he tried to do that, and I guess maybe he thought he had enough time, or maybe he thought the interaction worked differently, which is quite surprising. But he did have flash, and he could have just simply flashed away, and then guaranteed that extra space. He didn't do it, and he got caught twice in that first game, and it cost them the game. I mean, there were other problems in those team fights, but obviously without Deft, like you can't win those. So Zeus ends up getting player of the game. He's MVP for the first game. They win it. And we were all like, well, it's definitely doomed. Like KT, they had one chance and they blew it. They're going to be completely mental boomed. There's no way they come back. It's going to be a 2-0. And then KT reverse swept the series. And guess what? They did it with Vi Talia in game 2, which is what I cannot believe T1 allowed them to have Rumble and then Vi Talia in that draft. Yep. Insane.
Yeah, Perfect played really well in the next couple of games. I mean, Perfect has been overall, since he returned back to this roster, the strongest performing player. And this roster, part of KT, there are a lot of caveats. And I say this as a consummate hater of this KT roster, but you do have to contextualize some of these losses. And these losses are Perfect was sick, except he wasn't too sick to come to the arena and swap out halfway through. So God knows what was happening there. But didn't Beryl also have surgery or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know the details of what I first was told surgery, then I was told treatment, but something about his abdomen. That is what I was told. So I don't know any of the details, and it's not like a secret. I think it's officially out there. I just don't know what type of surgery / procedure he had. But I do know that it's very difficult for him to both walk long distances, but also for him to sit. And I heard that he wanted to actually try to play his game standing up because it was hard for him to stay seated for a long period of time in that Bro series. He's since recovered a lot, but he still didn't do the walkout, but looks like he's doing much better. But yeah, so Beryl was effectively injured. Perfect, I think, word on the street is he just had COVID-19. So, that's probably what was going on there.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's not official, but that's word
whatever.
on the street.
Everybody, it's just around now. Everybody's gonna get it over and over and over again.
So that he was sick, right? And if you've had COVID before, symptoms vary from person to person whether you've had it before or not. But I guess well enough to play the best on his team. But KT have been plagued by some of these issues, and that does mean that sometimes that can affect practice, especially if you're going into a scrim before your match, and it's like, are we playing perfect, or should we actually play casting in this scrim? Because are we going to play perfect on the match? It can get awkward. Casting's got to play his CL schedule where the team they had such great momentum after spring, but they're kind of fizzling out a little bit in CL, so they're probably focusing on their own stuff. And casting is ripped between these two things, and Perfect doesn't know if he's going to play, and then Barrow's got this procedure he's got to get done. So you could see all this.
Not to mention Pioshik's problem. He has actually been devastated by long-term chronic inconsistency.
Yeah, he's got that. He's got that illness.
It's a very serious condition for a league player.
But I think we can contextualize some of these. I mean, I don't think they're enough of an excuse for KT's performance, but and Beryl still is recovering, right? Perfect seems to be healthy now, but I think when you add up their strength of schedule plus all of these other issues, it's not shocking that they could have a bounce back game. I was more disappointed with T1's drafting in this series than I was with
What?
their
You don't
in-game
like to
performance.
see 3 games of Gumayushi Zeri, famous Zeri player Gumayushi? I mean, I think part of this, just at a basic level, is a return to comfort for KT. If you look at some of the champions they're picking, okay, Ezreal's very strong on 14-12, classic Deft champion, even if Deft definitely did underperform on it. But he also got his Jinx back, which is one of the Deft signature champions of all time. Pyosik is crucially not playing AP champions in this series. And they're back on Talia and Azir for BDD. So even if these picks may not be the most meta picks right now, they are, in fact, with kind of Trist bans, quirky bans coming through from KT, considering that neither BDD nor Faker is a exemplary Yone player. The matchup in the mid lane between these two particular players forced kind of the Azir and the Talia to come back because of their champion pools, which was more comfortable, honestly, for probably both Faker and for BDD.
Yeah, I really just think if BDD and Pyosik are playing picks that have setup, then KT can just play their most basic pick-based style, which is simple to play, but Barrow loves it. That's what he loves to do. He loves to go in
Barrel
and set up.
also back and engage low mechanics champions like Alistair and Leon is also huge.
Yeah. So that game 2, Ox and I looked at each other when the draft was done, once they put it up because they had to do it like backstage. And we were like, there's no way even KT could lose with this draft because they had the Vitalia set up, right? They had the Rumble pick into the Skarner, so they should have top control. Perfect got solo killed, which was a bit of a whoopsie, but it didn't matter. He still got control, still got a lead up on the top side.
That
And then
was funny, though.
Keria picked the Rakan into the Leona, and they have a Jinx with a pick comp, which is Jinx perfect, like Nirvana scenario.
It's the
You
same
reset
shit.
every
It's the
time.
same shit as like the Viego reset comp that they played in the next game, just with the Jinx
Yeah,
instead.
they really put this draft together very well, and I think T1 were super blindsided by it. They put the Azir prio way too high. They left the Rumble open, played into that, and then gave over the Vi Talia to BDD and Pyosik. Just felt like really silly. And then in the third game, I thought the draft was pretty good for KT and their play style, but it didn't seem like the biggest gap ever, like game 2 was. But then level 1, they just forgot about Braum's passive and just kind of walked in that way. I thought it was a great play by KT. The invade was good. They were able to catch the Tristana and also get the cleanse out of Guma and then push him out of the bottom lane. So he came to lane late. And they got huge advantages from just that level 1 play. And T1 just didn't respect it, and that kind of warped the entire game because there were some other plays that were made by T1 later on where they tried to catch up, and ended up backfiring, like Faker trying to hard push mid lane and coming back to lane using his rocket jump right before Pyosik shows up, so he gets ganked, and some other mishaps did happen. But T1 overall in that third game, looked like they were a little bit out of sorts. KT looked like the more coordinated team, the more prepared team. And that was for me like the big one. Like game 1, dropped the ball in a big way. KT had a big lead. They kind of messed it up. Game 2, they had a huge draft gap, but game 3 was the most impressive one because it was definitely a playable draft, but didn't feel like they had a huge edge. But the strategy and the setup and everything they did felt so methodical and so well planned out. It reminded me of some of the best moments we had from KT in spring, like when they upset GenG with the Senna composition. So that gives me some hope that maybe this team will get it together. But it might just be a Telecom war fluke and they lose the rest of their games. Who knows? But I have some hope.
I mean, I think it's very helpful that for KT that T1 didn't want to play into a lot of the strong picks, or couldn't, in fact, play a lot of the strong picks. Like the Zyra game, owner just looked out of sorts. It is hard to play. Like there are certain big upsides to the Zyra. Very fast, clear speeds, excellent objective control. But if you try and skirmish on that Zyra and they close the gap to you, you just die. You just die. And Pyosik did deserve like MVP of game 3. I thought he did really well on the Viego. But T1's style is and has been about creating picks and skirmishes. And Zyra's not good at that. They're not the stranglehold team that GenG is in terms of getting early game objectives, or like Canyon ultra fast pathing at 255 into the bot lane for a gank. They're also just, we can debate about how well Gumayushi plays Zeri. Some, like myself, may argue that he does it very badly and misses his cues and puts his cues backwards a lot of the time because his particular mouse movement doesn't really work with Zeri. Now, he's gotten better, and he has had good individual games, but it's also true that T1 just plays very badly with Zeri. Like, they are not the front-to-back team fighting, clean up with Zeri team. That's not who they are. And, like, having Viego and Zeri in the same roster is like an ultra snowball roster, but if you start losing that game, basically you can't do anything. So, you know, this may sound weird, but in some ways, I would prefer them to play Jhin with Viego, because they are a much better Jhin team than they are a Zeri team. And like play the pick compositions, but they weren't interested in doing that. So we ended up with 3 games of Gumayusi Zeri, which, you know, is not a great way for this T1 roster to play League of Legends, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it just doesn't suit their play style. I mean, Geft gave Owner a little bonus when he arcane shifted into the Zyra ult that one time, but overall, like, you're trying to play this into super long range Ezreal pick as well, and so, you know, it's hard to catch him with the Zyra ult. Obviously Nico, which T1
Plus the
plays a
level
lot.
1.
Yeah. Um, I want to talk about like the Nico that T1 plays a lot with Keria, because if Owner could play Nico jungle, which he never really did, because he was a top player along with Canyon and Peanut, and we were seeing this pick pulled out a little bit, then, you know, I'd be like, okay, well, you know, Zyra, kind of same idea in terms of how you want to set up engage, and in terms of like setup with your turrets and trying to set up the plants and stuff, like that's completely different than how Nico plays. But I feel like they trust Keria for that one to play the Nico, because he can find those angles to pop blossom, and
Only
Nico,
with Callista, though. That's the thing.
yeah, that's the caveat. But I mean, just in terms of how the engages work with these picks, I think Keria has a really good eye for this and has a really good way to set these engages up, even without Fate's Call. Like, there's ways for him to sneak his way around, you know, dash in, flash in, look for these engages. I think you have to have kind of that same sort of mindset mentality to play the Zyra jungle well, like Canyon does, you know, because he's played a lot of it in the past, like the Nico. It's really similar in terms of how those ultimates work and how you set up team fights with them. And you can see how Canyon sets up fights, how he sets up dives. And Owner's the kind of guy who sets up dives with like Xin Zhao, you know, Lee Sin, those types of champions. Not really the more ultimate based, but actually the you know, more just basic ability based and tankier engaged champions. So, you know, I do wonder, and I feel like this might be a symptom of some of what we could be worried about in the future games for Owner. If like Brand becomes more meta, for example, will he be a good Brand player? Like, will he be able to play Karthus well? We don't know. There's not a lot of data on this, so maybe AP jungle is not for Owner, and that could be a weakness that you know, T1 could get exposed on, maybe even at the World Cup. So that's a little concerning, but again, we don't know yet. But the Zyra performance didn't really leave us excited, especially when you consider the way T1 play. Like, is get mid prio, set up dives. Canyon was able to do that with Chovy so incredibly well with the Zyra pick. And then when you T1's running it, obviously the level 1 disaster created a lot of problems, but they weren't able to do anything like that with the pick. Obviously, that again with that big asterisk, but let's see. I want to see Owner test it again on this pick, maybe against a different team, maybe with less shenanigans at level 1, and see how he does, because I don't want to judge him too harshly, but they did seem...
I mean, he was losing some of those skirmishes in Topside River too, like, and that doesn't really have that much to do with the level 1 whoopsie that occurred, where Faker dies to a, you know, kind of obvious Braum invade. I mean, certainly you lose pressure as a result of that, but I mean, Pyosik really just had Owner's number, it felt like, in that game.
Yeah. And I mean, Viego, if Viego gets on top of a Zyra, especially if the Viego's ahead, this Zyra just like presses ult and hopes that somebody shows up, but that she dies.
Yeah, I don't think, like, as we've said many times, this meta is not very kind to T1. And they still have, you know, they can still pull out like it was interesting to me that T1 was banning Ashe on blue side in this series, because I think Ashe is so important to T1. As we saw last week, like when they're given Ashe, they can really do very good things. So I was also just surprised that the prio for them in this game was not to B1 pick Ashe, because I feel like that enables their strength in some very good ways.
Yeah. I mean, it's a flex pick for them. They've run it in support a ton, so
Yeah, exactly.
it it's just it is a bit strange. It's almost like I don't know if you think about the series from a different lens, the same lens that we were all kind of looking into before it. Like, hey, it's KT seems really, 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 really bad right now, and like this should be a pretty free win playing against this huge crowd. Let's play Zyra jungle. Let's put Guma on Zeri. Let's like test it out a little bit. Like let's run these different picks. Let's see if we can make it work on stage. Because there's no way KT stop us no matter what. And Guma can play some more games of Zeri and prove to people like Monte, like, you can't play Zeri. Like, I can play Zeri against KT at least. I don't know. I'm not. I don't want to say I want to read into it too much in this way, but when you look at the drafting and some of the decisions made, it felt so counterintuitive that
I mean,
it
giving up
does
the
almost
Rumble
make
was really mind-boggling.
yeah, it just makes you wonder, like, what was the plan with that? Like, were they trying to prove something or test something and it just completely failed? It's a bit of a head scratcher for sure.
Yeah, and it doesn't really leave encouraging signs heading into the Esports World Cup either, which we'll, start talking about now because while it is obviously not the most major international competition that we have, and in fact, like they've kind of WWE'd the bracket by just having, China versus Korea top side, China versus Korea bottom side, and then NA versus EU top and bottom bracket as well in the quarterfinals, because they're clearly just trying to create parity in the quarterfinals, which will create probably some really lopsided semifinals. And then hopefully we'll get a good final out of it. It's also all best of 3, which is a little bit weird, but they only have 4 days to run this event. And as we've said many times, this most likely is just a trial run to see whether or not the Esports World Cup gets MSI next year, because MSI has been mysteriously rescheduled into early July based on the new 3-split system. But before we get into that, we have another sponsor today here on the Monte and Wolf Show. That's Raycon, right here. So here's my Raycon earbuds. These have been really great for me to use, especially on long flights, which I've been taking recently. So these are the Raycon Everyday earbuds. Very good audio quality, guys. They have a lot of new features. So with the latest iteration, because they have made many iterations of these now, you get active noise cancellation. So that is a new feature with the latest model. You can get them in a variety of colors as well. They go right into the case to charge. Case, of course, has a battery also, so charge up the case and you'll get multiple charges off of it. Very, very easy. The active noise cancellation in the earbuds, though, was really great for me on flights in particular. And they also have an awareness mode, so you can kind of hear what's going on around you too, which I really appreciate. So you're not just, you have both options, the noise cancellation and the awareness mode. And they're weatherproof and sweat resistant if you take them to the gym. So they've been really great. They're also significantly cheaper than many other earbuds of comparable quality that you might find and come in a variety of colors. Have you enjoyed them, Wolf?
Yeah, I have. I've been using them a little bit. When I don't want to wear this headset for too long, it's pulling on my hair and stuff. Just casually browsing the internet or gaming, but they've been really helpful when I'm playing my PS5 in the other room, and my wife is hanging out and also like watching stuff on her laptop or using her phone, so she can actually watch something without my audio bothering her, and also her audio isn't bothering me because I can noise cancel it out. So it's been nice, and they connect really easily. Quality is really good, so I've been enjoying them a lot. And I think the price is definitely like, super reasonable for how good they are.
Yep. So go to buyraycon.com/M&W. That's the letters, obviously, M for Monty, A-N-D-W for Wolf. So M&W today to get 15% off your Raycon order plus free shipping. That's right. You'll get 15% off and free shipping at buyraycon.com/M&W. buyraycon.com/MANDW. So thank you very much to Raycon. Let us talk about the Esports World Cup in Riyadh. You'll be taking a trip out there to cast it, and you said which matchups are you hoping to get, Wolf? What would you like to cast at this event?
obviously, I want to get BLG T1 and GenG top esports because those are going to be the best matches of the quarterfinals. But I think honestly, any G2 game is going to be fun to cast. I think G2 is pretty good right now. Their MSI performance was honestly, to me, I thought it was a lot better than most people expected because you just stomp Europe and then you're never really tested. Like, are you actually going to end up being able to show up at an international? I felt like they kind of did at MSI. But yeah, I want the GenG in the T1 series. I'm really curious to see how T1 match up against BLG right now because T1 definitely looking a little bit shaky, even in their
I mean,
wins.
BLG is too. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's wild because I think a lot of this might come down to the form on the day because it's actually just a best of 3 and not a best of 5 as well. So if, one team has a better read, especially if the team that's on red side has a better read, then they get their side selection if they lose, and then they get to get that either they win on red side, then they have that extra side selection in game 3. That advantage I think could be pretty big, especially because red side seems pretty strong right now, actually, with the picks that you can get in it and T1's draft weaknesses. Like, I could see a world where T1 get upset there, which would be horrible for the tournament. But the thing like you were mentioning earlier with the kind of lopsided bracket is whoever wins BLG T1 and GenG Top Esports is probably going to the finals because I don't imagine. I mean, I could see a world where G2 upsets, but I don't see a world where Fnatic or TL upset either of those teams. So it's a really important match where it's kind of like in its own way like a loser bracket final or something, because the next match is going to be comparatively so much easier to play out. So we might have some bad semis. I think the G2 semis, assuming they take out FlyQuest, which seems like a given at this point. Sorry, Papa. I think that is that one could be more interesting. But Gen G's dominance right now and how well they're playing this meta and how good of a meta it is for Canyon, how good Chovy is at Corki right now. I don't think there's a world where Gen G don't win this tournament. Like at this
Right.
point, like based on what we're seeing eye test wise, I haven't watched all the LPL games, but I've watched some of the top games.
I
I've
mean,
watched some of the BLG games.
yeah, BLG, the thing about BLG is that Knight has not looked good. In fact, he's looked quite bad, especially by his standards. So, I think the T1 BLG, I still favor BLG because it feels like they're more meta. Like Jun historically has been, if we look at his performance earlier this year and then in previous years, like he is that AP carry guy. He was great at Brand in spring. He continues to play Brand very actively. His Nidalee has been feared for years. His Karthus has been good. So, I mean, he feels like he's much more well adjusted to the meta, but Knight's individual performance has been poor. And it's been poor in a group that shouldn't really be challenging to a team the caliber of BLG. Sure, they went 5-1, but you can say, well, the last game they won, it didn't really matter whether they won or lost against LGD. So was that really important? Top esports, I think, has looked better. Obviously, Cream having Yone available in a lot of these AD champions is huge. So I think I have more faith in top esports at this point in time, but we'll see because that matchup might be actually advantageous in mid lane for T1 if we talk about them versus BLG, just based on Knight's recent performances.
And owner outside of the KT series also having a lot of great performances. So I think that, if you're playing through mid and you draft for that, like if he plays Vi and they do Vi Talia and stuff like that, I think that that's quite strong for T1. Especially if Knight's, a little bit shaky at the moment. So obviously, I think to me, my hope and any Korean esports fans' hope would be that we get another Gen G T1 finals. But if Gen G wins, again, I don't think they lose to G2. There's just no way. Maybe they drop a game because G2 is good, right? But like I don't want to claim that Caps is going to go toe to toe with Chovy. I don't think we're going to see that.
I mean, here's the crazy thing: Caps might be the second best mid laner at this tournament. That's actually not outrageous to say.
I know, like I've watched a little bit of LEC, and obviously I watched.
They've not been playing great in LEC, to be clear, but
but like he's had some good moments, right? And I think obviously his international performance at MSI was really the part of this that's like what I'm basing this off of. But if we have a T1 Gen G finals at this current moment with both of their forms, I think Gen G 3-0. Like I don't see a world where T1 actually ups Gen G right now. It's a way better meta for them. They already beat them in regular season, and right now Faker's form, although better than it was at MSI, is still it's not good enough to take on the likes of Chovy, who may be the greatest player in the world right now. The games haven't always been about him. Like, it's a more carry-focused jungle meta, so Canyon some has taken those away from Pays and Lehens have had amazing
Very
games as
good
well.
games,
So
yeah.
it does feel like Chovy has kind of been a passenger in some of GenG's wins, where he has the big numbers on Corki, but the game
He
really
just
wasn't
he just
about
he
him.
just sort of loses lane gracefully on Yone, you know.
I'm more talking about the Corki Tristana games.
That's fair.
But like the Yone losing lane it does happen. Um, but I think when you look at how many avenues for success GenG have as well in this meta, like
I mean,
if
it's just
Keen's on bubble, they
crazy.
can play that.
It's crazy. I mean, like Keen was also the first one to really debut the Mordekaiser counterpick into Skarner, which is such a keen move to have this, and he played it extremely well, and it's super annoying. And if you can't, if you also can't play the Mordekaiser, what ends up happening, as we saw versus GenG, is like, okay, well, shit, you can't let them have Skarner because Keen is very good at Skarner, but you also can't pick Skarner, so you must ban Skarner. They basically force you to ban Skarner because otherwise you just get Mordekaisered. So unless you also have the Mordekaiser available to you, it's going to be very difficult, I think, to leave Skarner up, which is annoying because then you have to decide, well, that's a must ban now. So what other junk must we, do we have to ban? Now we're down to 2 bans, and it's like, do I really want to play against Chovy's Corki or Trist? Do I really want to play against Pace's Ezreal? Do I really want to play against Canyon's Karthus or Nidalee or now Zyra that are so scary? It's tough. And like, this team is built for this meta, I agree. And all the players are performing at such a level right now that it feels almost inconceivable that GenG would not win this tournament.
Yeah, and what I love about the way that GenG has set up these drafts too, like you mentioned the trap with the Mordekaiser. You also have to ban Rumble if you want to play the Skarner in
Sure.
that top lane. Like if Keen has something like a Rumble, or even though it's less strong these days, still relevant, the Twisted Fate, like he will absolutely dominate the matchup and get huge leads and then take that and push it into his team the rest of the map. But he's been playing so selflessly, in these games where he's roaming a ton, dropping waves, and actually making plays for Chovy, making plays on the top side objective, be it the Grubs or the Herald, and roaming a ton on the Skarner pick. And I think that's one thing that most Skarners aren't doing in the LCK right now. They kind of just sit there and hope they get money while they lose lane, especially in losing matchups where they're just gonna farm under turret and then they're like, I've got impale, they can't dive me. Keen's like, no, I'm leaving. I'm not there. I'm not hiding under turret. I'm actually gonna make something happen because I can go through walls. I can rotate quickly and I can make something happen in mid lane. I can teleport bottom and make a play. Keen is really sacrificing a lot of his resources to help his team win elsewhere on this pick. Mordekaiser's similar situation, right? Where he's sacrificing a lot of resources. He's not going to be a huge player in terms of what his damage output's going to be, his playmaking. He's just going to ult the right target on an objective and win the fight for his team by just kind of like standing in the death realm and being like, all right, well, you
Yeah.
can't play the game for a few
I mean,
seconds.
it's interesting too because if we think about their first round opponent, so 369 actually has also been playing a lot of that Mordekaiser and Skarner matchup, so it's not going to be relevant in that particular head-to-head series. And 369 also a very good Rumble player, so top lane is actually probably one of the more interesting head-to-head matchups in this series. I mean, if you are looking at top esports though, and we consider the MSI run that they had, like another concern is Cream really did underperform in his first international competition, and we didn't expect top to be super good because this was going to be Cream's international debut, and that obviously leads to a lot of nerves. But now we get to see if this is going to be a repetitive thing for him, or if now he has that MSI experience, so he's going to come back, and obviously the meta suits him very nicely now, so he should be, we hope, stronger in this one. There's a world, unfortunately, this is going to be single elimination, Wolf, but there's a world where top is actually the second best team at this tournament, just gets eliminated in quarterfinals.
Yeah, that's the thing about this bracket that's a little bit rough. But if you had swapped GenG and FlyQuest, for example, then you just get the same matchup anyways in semis, and then you just get 2 stomps in the quarterfinals. So it makes the
Well,
quarterfinals more interesting.
I'm just going to put this out there, Wolf. Some of the teams might actually appreciate more of that prize money through a more fair bracket seeding, considering that there's $1 million in prize pool at this event, and you get 100,000 for getting to semis as opposed to 50,000 for getting eliminated in quarters. So I'm just going to put it out there.
I mean, I get that too. I think in terms of prize money, like teams that are weaker who are gonna lose out on that based on the bracket. I don't know. This is my take on prize money because this has been an issue like all time in esports, right? Like even back in the StarCraft days, people would be pissed about their seating because they don't have an org, they don't have the money. They're like, oh man, you put me up against Naniwa, and now like I can't have the opportunity to make like $1,000 at this MLG because I got knocked out in the first round because I'm an amateur player or whatever. I needed that money. I traveled here all the way. I flew on my plane, etc. Right? But these are huge orgs, right? And a lot of them are in the Esports World Cup to try to get some of that prize money, right? But for me, like when people complain about prize money for the bracket, I'm like, well, I mean, the whole point of the tournament for me is to win the finals to get that prize money. And like if you're like, oh, I wish I got Fnatic because I could beat them and get a few $100,000 more dollars. I'm like, well, that's not really in the spirit of competition, is it, Monty? They're in the tournament to win, okay? And I know you're not going to because GenG exists and BLG exists and T1 exists and Top Esports exists, but maybe if you prep really hard, you work really hard, Monty, and you quadruple your level of performance in the next few days, and you show up to Esports World Cup, maybe you can get that bag. Maybe you can get that big money. Maybe you can upset, but
Yeah. I think, though, that it's possible that the best match of this entire tournament is GenG versus Top, either way it goes. If it is a very close matchup, almost certainly those are going to be the top 2 teams at this event, unfortunately, and we only get to see a best of 3. But it's close enough to, here's the thing, guys. I don't actually mind this because it's close enough to MSI, and at least we get another international event that it's fine. This is fine. Here's the thing, Worlds is allowed to be single elimination if we just have more international events, period. You know what I mean? The problem with Worlds in League of Legends is that it's one of 2 international events and it's single elimination. We hopefully will have the calendar more populated. Riot has said that they want to talk to more independent tournament operators in the future. It feels like they are moving gradually towards shorter domestic splits and more international events. That's what we're supposed to have next year. So, hopefully with more international events, even if they are brief, like the first international event is supposed to be a week long. This is only a week long, basically. If they're more frequent, it'll feel less bad to have these single elimination brackets. That said, I mean, the seeding is still ridiculous. And it's clearly designed to just have some like Western versus Western hype, which people want. And obviously the hope would generally be that we get that in the lower bracket, but there just isn't time within the calendar to do it right now.
Yeah. And I think, maybe the next year's Esports World Cup or MSI, depending on how all that shakes out, we'll get that. But I'm pretty optimistic about what you're talking about in terms of domestic leagues being shorter, which I don't like. But at the end of the day, like if we get more international events, like IEM could come back, for example, for League of Legends, which was a historic tournament for the game, a decade ago. Maybe we could get a DreamHack in there. So teams can choose to participate in these tournaments or not, and that's the cool thing. I think most teams will want to go, but if teams are fatigued from their regular season, they can go, no, we don't want to play in that. And I think for Korean teams and Chinese teams, they'll probably always go because they have a huge chance of winning that tournament and getting a bunch of money and also like furthering their legacy, etc. I think a lot of Western teams might choose to decline, if they're really trying to win their domestic split or prepare for MSI, but there's like a little IEM before that, and they're like, maybe I'll skip that so we can have a better MSI. I understand the ideas behind potentially people skipping. Because a lot of people I've seen a lot of comments on the internet, like, if there's more international events, then the players will be more tired. I'm like, yeah, but they don't actually have
Welcome
to
to Counter-Strike, motherfuckers. Players always tired, flying around the world. Somehow they make it through, guys. Somehow, keep that energy, guys. Why don't you keep that energy and go start tweeting at F1 and be like, all the drivers are so tired going to 20 events all the way around. They're always jet lagged. Like, yeah, that's just the life. Suck it up.
Yeah, I mean that may be how it is. And for Counter-Strike and for StarCraft 2, that's how it was. Back in the old StarCraft 2 days, there'd be like 12 events a year you'd be flying to. Playing your MLG, your NASL, your IEMs, your DreamHacks. You flew to GSL because you wanted to try to qualify, but you lost. So then you had to go. You're like, oh, well, I guess I'm not playing in GSL. I'm gonna go play in this other tournament. There's always historically been a lot of travel in esports. Now that we have, and then Riot made like domestic leagues where you have a home studio, and you're not just traveling around all the time and doing small tournaments. We have these big regular seasons, just like we, had StarCraft Pro League. Now people, I think, are like, wait, we have to travel again? I'm like, well, maybe.
Not that much, really.
Not that much. I mean, I hate traveling.
Also, just not that many of you.
I get it.
Also, just not that many of you. Like, literally, this was the top 2 teams from every region from spring at MSI and now at this one. The next tournament, the new tournament, is going to be the top 1 team from every region. And then Worlds is either top 3 or 4 teams. There's still a 6-month break for most teams, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, if you don't want to go, you don't have to go, but you should go. I think we need more international events. And I would also be okay with an internet. And I know Monty is going to scoff at this. I'd be okay with an international event like a NA and EU exclusive.
No, I'm totally fine with that, by the way.
Like, that's totally okay. You could run that whenever it makes sense for those two regions. Might not make sense for LPL or LCK, but
the reason why I want to do that, and people will be like, oh, Rift Rivals sucks. Rift Rivals sucked because of the format, guys, not because the idea of competition between NA and EU and China and Korea was bad. It's because it was done badly. Like, Wolf, I do want the NA versus EU, not because I want to watch that, because the existence of that implies a China versus Korea tournament, which is what I actually want, right?
Yeah, I'd love to have that too.
Yeah, I think there are lots of different ways that you could do this. And, sure, a lot of people will get entertainment from the regional monkey knife fight that would be Europe versus NA as G2 just crushes everybody. I mean, the real thing, and as you know from StarCraft formats, Wolf, would be to bring back an all-kill format in NA versus EU. And for those of you who don't know, guys, all-kill was a Pro League format, and Wolf was a caster for Pro League, by the way, in StarCraft. And because StarCraft was a 1v1 game, but also had teams, they had to figure out a way to make this interesting, because how do you have a team-based 1v1 game? And one of the answers was a format called All Kill, where each team puts up a player, and then the player who wins just stays on stage in like a best of 7, and the other team just keeps throwing new players at this guy until one of them defeats him, and it's 1st to 4 wins it. So imagine if we just got to see, GenG rock up, and then LPL selects the team, and GenG just stays on stage until they lose, or they 4-0. It's fucking hype.
But yeah, you might want to start with like T1 first, because let's see what they can see, who they can knock out, and then if after they lose, you put GenG in. Then like you're like, oh, maybe Guangdong comes out next because they've got a really cool draft. No, I love this idea. I think it's really difficult to pull off in League of Legends, because you have to move 5 player setups every time you switch a team out. But I think it could be.
I mean, you do that anyway. That doesn't matter.
So, yeah, the All Kill format was awesome. It's basically King of the Hill. But it doesn't that sounds weird, and it's not like King of the Hill kind of implies you're one against everyone, but it's a team format. But yeah, it's really rad. Now you're just giving me nostalgia and making me miss the old days. But yeah, I think when we look at this tournament, it will be, it's obviously quite a controversial tournament, but I think it'll be a tournament that people only remember like the first matches of and the last match of. I think people will not talk about the semifinals. I think people will not talk. There's not going to be a whole lot of like near airport jokes because it's just not going to last too long. And then it's going to be like, okay, did GenG win another tournament? Or like what people will remember from this tournament is, did GenG win? Did LPL win? Like if LPL wins, like if Top ends up taking the tournament, then everyone will be like, oh, like does the Golden Road not count because they didn't get Esports World Cup? Or like is GenG gonna fall apart? Or like, what does it mean?
No, Thorne and I talked about this on SI, by the way, which is like, it's not so much the golden road doesn't count. It's that can we invent the platinum road or the diamond road that includes this one? You know what I mean? And no, I mean the answer is no. This is a blip on the radar. It's not a major international. I mean, it is an international event, but obviously the formats are nowhere near as robust or important as MSI and Worlds. And so like it'll be fun, but at the end of the day, it's kind of whatever in terms of the calendar.
And I think to further contextualize why this tournament is so short, why it's only 4 days, there's about like 10,000 games at this event.
Yeah.
they're running so many games. They're even running games simultaneously.
Let me put it this way. I have a feeling if they were allowed to run a 3-week tournament, they would run a 3-week tournament. The thing is that this is a period every year where Riot's entire company takes a break over the 4th of July week. And so typically there have not been games in many regions this week anyway, especially in LCS and LEC. Sometimes the Asian regions have continued to play through the 4th of July week. But because that was a dark week anyway, for a couple, if not all major regions, it made sense just to have somebody else run something else during this time period. So that's why, is because it's the Riot vacation week. And they want to get back, and they also still have to, they still have the rest of their calendar. And this calendar was probably planned out prior to negotiations with, the Saudi government about running this event in ESL.
So I mean, there's no way you can run a multi-week event during the middle of a region's regular season because it just ruins everything. But it's also a small part of a huge, larger tournament. So from the tournament's perspective as well, it's also like, well, we have a lot of these mini tournaments. They're all going to stack up. There's going to be club points and stuff like that. For all of the games. So like, how does one team do in Rainbow Six and in League of Legends, but also in like Street Fighter, like that's all going to be added up. So I think for the overall importance of this tournament for the orgs, it's a lot about prize pool. I think if you win the tournament, there's a lot of prestige there. But otherwise, it's about getting your club points for the rest of the Esports World Cup. So if you make semis, that could actually affect how many points you get, for example, in other games, and might actually impact your score there, which is also big money.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, the way this works is that there is actually a separate org leaderboard, as Wolf is saying, where the higher you place in multiple events, you get points, and then you can win. The orgs will get paid millions of dollars for doing the best across all titles, which is why you saw orgs mysteriously signing StarCraft 2 players, Wolf, which I know they definitely will not drop right after this tournament ends, right? Surely this is a long-term deal that they're making and a commitment to StarCraft 2 and other smaller games, not a cynical play to get millions of dollars and then immediately drop those rosters.
Well, I mean, if the players perform, I mean, they'll use them next year to try to get them. Yeah.
They'll just re-sign them next year. Nobody's going to pick them up.
I mean, this was, by the way, like, side note, like, I don't want to go on too many StarCraft rants today, but the Esports World Cup created this insane market for StarCraft 2 players that like has not happened for so long. So
I'm glad the players are getting the bag. Let me put it that way.
The top players were all just like talking to each other like, okay, nobody take less than $1 million because they need to sign us. And like all the players, it was creating this crazy fiasco where all the players were like, I went from like, I guess I need to get a real job to, oh, I'm making more than I've ever made in my entire career salary.
I'm happy. As somebody who likes StarCraft, I'm happy for those guys.
Yeah, no, I am as well. So like, it's been really cool that all shook up and there was a big like bidding war for some of these top players. And I for one, am also really looking forward to the international event that will be the Esports World Cup for StarCraft 2. Now all these players have orgs and stuff. But yeah, so it's a small tournament. We used to have weekend tournaments back in the day. For all sorts of esports, including MOBAs, but after the big like esports crash that happened a decade ago, people were like, I don't want to run this, and all the orgs collapsed and like cut the fat, and then publishers were like, you can't run those events anyways, and then we had only long tournaments. But I think people forget that this is what a League of Legends tournament would have looked like 11 years ago. So
well, even in the LCS era, there were MLG events. So basically some weekends the LCS was actually broadcast from an MLG. That happened in like the first couple of years of LCS.
Yeah. So I'm kind of excited to see how this event does and how it does viewership wise, and see how, like, do people enjoy this short format? Because, if you don't want to watch the Esports World Cup, for your own reasons, that's fine. But if people like this format, then maybe this could be at IEM, right? Like, this could be somewhere else as well. This shortened format of just invite 8 teams, and it could be
Honestly,
this
as
format
somebody,
with
as
4
somebody,
NA, 4 EU.
as somebody who cast IEM Katowice and IEM San Jose in like 2014, 2015 for League of Legends, there were actually some decent formats that they were able to put together in a week. You know what I mean? And some of those tournaments were very fun. I hope we get more of them.
Yeah. So I feel like for the broader scope, you could look at this tournament as a guinea pig for what a weekend tournament could look like, just one of many different format options.
Indeed. Well, guys, that is going to be it for this week's show. So next week, no doubt, we will be talking about the upcoming remainder of the regular season, as well as the performance of the teams at the Esports World Cup. So we'll be back to discuss all of those things next week here on the Monte Wolf Show. We'll see you then.